A 5-year-old girl vanished, and for nearly 2 years, almost nobody realized she was gone. There were no urgent headlines, no statewide alerts dominating television screens, and no massive search effort filling the streets of New Hampshire. Instead, there was silence. When authorities finally discovered how long Harmony Montgomery had been missing, the question that stunned America was painfully simple. How could a child disappear for so long without anyone sounding the alarm? This was never just a missing child case. It was the story of a little girl caught between family instability, addiction, poverty, and systemic failures. Before we examine what happened, we must ask a difficult question. Did Harmony Montgomery vanish in a single moment? Or had she been disappearing from people's attention long before anyone realized she was gone? As we move through this case, pay attention not only to the evidence, but also to the warning signs. Many tragedies are not created by one catastrophic event. They are built gradually through overlooked concerns, unanswered questions, and opportunities that quietly pass by. If you enjoy thoughtful true crime analysis and psychological investigations, remember to subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us as we explore one of the most heartbreaking child welfare failures in recent American history. Our story begins in Manchester, New Hampshire. To most residents, it was a typical American city where families prepared for holidays, children attended school, and life followed a familiar rhythm. Nothing about the streets or neighborhoods suggested that a national tragedy was unfolding nearby. Yet, some of the darkest stories begin in places that appear completely ordinary from the outside. As Christmas approached in late 2019, homes were decorated with lights and families made plans for the holidays. While many children were counting down the days until Christmas morning, Harmony Montgomery was living in circumstances that were becoming increasingly unstable. Financial hardship, family conflict, and substance abuse were placing growing pressure on the adults responsible for her care. Psychologists often describe chronic stress as something that gradually narrows a person's emotional world. Patience becomes harder to maintain. Frustration grows more quickly. Empathy can slowly erode under constant pressure. Children living in these environments frequently learn to adapt by becoming quiet observers, carefully monitoring the moods and reactions of the adults around them. At the center of this story was Harmony Montgomery. Born in 2014, Harmony was known for her blonde hair, bright personality, and a visual impairment that affected one of her eyes. People who met her often described her as affectionate, cheerful, and eager for attention. She was a child who wanted connection and approval, much like any other little girl her age. One of the saddest realities of true crime is that victims are often remembered only for the tragedy that happened to them. Harmony was more than a case file. She was a child with favorite activities, daily routines, and simple dreams. Like every young child, she depended entirely on the adults around her for protection, guidance, and love. Her childhood, however, was marked by instability. Custody arrangements shifted repeatedly. Different caregivers entered and exited her life. Relatives, foster placements, and child welfare agencies all became part of a complicated system surrounding her upbringing. Research consistently shows that children thrive when they experience stability and predictability. Harmony rarely had either. Despite those challenges, she continued adapting to the world around her. Children possess a remarkable ability to normalize circumstances that adults might find overwhelming. Yet resilience should never be mistaken for safety. A child may appear strong, while still carrying emotional burdens far beyond what any child should face. One of the most significant figures in Harmony's life was her biological father, Adam Montgomery. In 2019, he gained custody of Harmony after years of not being a central presence in her daily life. At the time, few people could have predicted how important that decision would later become to the investigation. Living with Adam was his wife, Kayla Montgomery. Together, they cared for several children while struggling with significant financial and personal difficulties. Life inside the household was often unstable, shaped by uncertainty and mounting stress. Another key figure was Harmony's biological mother, Crystal Sorey. Although she no longer had custody, she continued trying to maintain contact with her daughter. Like many parents separated from their children, she relied on messages, phone calls, and updates to remain connected. She had no idea that those efforts would later become crucial to uncovering the truth. There was also Kevin Montgomery, Harmony's uncle. At one point, he reported concerns after observing injuries involving Harmony. Looking back, that report would become one of several warning signs that appeared long before her disappearance became publicly known. From a criminal psychology perspective, one of the most striking aspects of this case is the accumulation of overlooked indicators. Serious family violence rarely appears without warning. More often, it develops through gradual escalation. Concerning behavior becomes familiar. Small incidents are rationalized. Over time, dangerous situations begin to feel normal to the people living closest to them. By the end of 2019, the Montgomery family faced growing instability. Financial struggles intensified. Housing became uncertain. Reports later revealed periods during which family members lived in vehicles and temporary accommodations. For a young child, that kind of instability can transform everyday life into a constant state of uncertainty. Compounding those problems were ongoing issues involving substance abuse and chronic dysfunction. Together, these factors created an environment where stress continued to rise and protective safeguards continued to weaken. Behind closed doors, a vulnerable child was becoming increasingly isolated from the people and systems that should have protected her. As winter settled over New Hampshire, Harmony Montgomery remained largely invisible to the outside world. To neighbors and strangers, she was simply another little girl living her life. Yet behind the scenes, warning signs were accumulating. The most chilling part is that no one yet realized how close this story was moving toward disaster. Soon, Harmony would disappear into one of America's darkest mysteries. By early December 2019, Harmony Montgomery was entering what investigators would later describe as the final known period of her life. Unlike many missing child cases, there would be no final text message, no eyewitness account marking a precise moment, and no emergency call for help. Instead, the timeline would be reconstructed years later through testimony, fragmented memories, and the absence left behind. At the time, the Montgomery family was living under increasingly unstable conditions. Financial hardship had become a daily reality. Housing insecurity forced family members to move between temporary locations, and at certain points, they were living out of a vehicle. The constant movement created an environment where routines disappeared and outside oversight became increasingly limited. For children, instability often means uncertainty. For adults already struggling with stress, addiction, and financial pressure, it can become something else entirely. Investigators would later hear accounts describing a household where frustration and tension were becoming more visible as conditions deteriorated. According to testimony presented later in court, Harmony had difficulties with personal hygiene during this period. Prosecutors argued that this became a source of anger for Adam Montgomery. On the surface, it may appear to be a minor issue. Yet criminal psychologists often note that severe violence can emerge from seemingly trivial triggers when an individual already struggles with impulse control and chronic aggression. Witnesses who interacted with the family during late 2019 later recalled something important. After a certain point, they simply stopped seeing Harmony. No dramatic disappearance occurred in front of strangers. No public scene drew attention. She gradually vanished from everyday view, leaving behind no obvious moment that would trigger immediate concern. That quiet disappearance is one of the most disturbing aspects of this case. Most missing child investigations begin with a frantic search because someone quickly notices the absence. In Harmony's case, there was no such response. Her disappearance unfolded in silence, hidden within a family already living on the margins of stability. Prosecutors would later argue that Harmony Montgomery died during a mourning in December 2019, while her family was living under extreme instability and traveling in a vehicle. Because her body has never been found, many details remain uncertain. The exact sequence of events may never be fully known. Yet, investigators eventually became less focused on the moment itself and more concerned with what allegedly followed afterward. What makes this case especially haunting is the silence that came next. There was no emergency call, no attempt to seek medical help, and no report that a child had been injured or was missing. According to prosecutors, Harmony's absence was never acknowledged. Instead, her presence appeared to slowly fade from daily life, as if a 5-year-old girl had simply ceased to exist. Children leave traces everywhere. They leave toys, clothing, routines, questions, and memories. Yet investigators later concluded that Harmony's belongings gradually vanished alongside her. The ordinary signs of a young child's existence seemed to fade, as though someone wanted to erase reminders that she had ever been there. For nearly 2 years, the disappearance remained hidden from public view. During that time, life continued moving forward for everyone outside the immediate circle surrounding the family. Schools operated normally. Holidays came and went. Seasons changed. Meanwhile, a little girl who should have been growing older appeared to have vanished without explanation. The silence finally began to break near the end of 2021. Harmony's biological mother, Crystal Sorey, became increasingly alarmed after repeated attempts to contact her daughter failed. Communication had always been complicated, but this felt different. The lack of information stretched on for months and gradually transformed concern into fear. When Crystal contacted Adam Montgomery seeking answers, she encountered conflicting explanations. According to later reports, Adam claimed Harmony was living with her mother. The statement immediately created a problem because Crystal knew it was false. Harmony was not with her. If she was not with Adam and not with Crystal, where was she? As Crystal continued searching for answers, her concerns slowly turned into fear. Each attempt to learn about Harmony's whereabouts seemed to create more confusion rather than clarity. Explanations shifted, messages went unanswered, and communication became increasingly strained. What had once seemed like a difficult family situation was beginning to feel far more troubling. Eventually, Crystal found herself confronting a possibility that no parent ever wants to imagine. After months of trying to gather information on her own, Crystal finally contacted law enforcement. What initially appeared to be a missing child report quickly raised deeper concerns for investigators. Detectives began reconstructing Harmony's timeline, reviewing records, interviewing relatives, and tracing her movements. Their goal was simple but alarming: determine the last verified moment anyone could confirm that Harmony Montgomery had been seen alive. The answer shocked even experienced investigators. As interviews expanded and records were reviewed, authorities realized that almost nobody had seen Harmony for an extraordinarily long period. The timeline stretched back, not weeks or months, but nearly 2 years. A 5-year-old child had effectively disappeared without triggering an immediate large-scale investigation. Attention quickly turned toward Adam Montgomery. His statements became a focus because they appeared inconsistent with information gathered from other sources. Detectives repeatedly encountered contradictions that raised concerns about the accuracy of his account. The more questions investigators asked, the more complicated the narrative appeared to become. Additional interviews revealed earlier allegations involving violence toward Harmony. Relatives described incidents that had concerned them long before the disappearance became public. These accounts did not prove what happened in December 2019, but they added important context regarding the environment in which Harmony had been living. Then came one of the most troubling discoveries in the entire investigation. Authorities learned that concerns about Harmony's welfare had existed before she vanished. Reports involving possible abuse and injuries had been communicated to child protection officials. Warning signs had appeared. Concerns had been raised. Yet no intervention ultimately prevented the tragedy investigators now believed had occurred. As detectives dug deeper, the case became a story of ignored warnings, systemic failures, and a child lost between broken layers of protection. The central mystery grew even darker. If Harmony Montgomery had truly died in late 2019, how had that reality remained hidden for nearly 2 years? And who, if anyone, could have stopped it before it was too late? When Manchester police launched a major investigation into Harmony Montgomery's disappearance in late 2021, detectives immediately faced a daunting challenge. Most missing child cases begin with fresh evidence and a clear timeline. Harmony's case was different. Investigators were attempting to reconstruct events that may have occurred nearly 2 years earlier. Memories had faded, records were incomplete, and many potential clues had already disappeared. Search teams examined apartments, shelters, vehicles, and other locations connected to the Montgomery family. Detectives pursued numerous leads, hoping a forgotten detail might reveal Harmony's fate. Yet the absence of a recovered body complicated every step. Investigators were searching not only for a missing child, but for evidence of a tragedy hidden for years. As interviews expanded, a troubling picture emerged. Relatives, neighbors, and former acquaintances described a household shaped by instability, conflict, and ongoing tension. Several accounts referenced Adam Montgomery's aggressive behavior. While no single statement solved the case, recurring patterns helped detectives build a broader understanding of the environment surrounding Harmony's disappearance. Time remained one of the investigation's greatest enemies. Surveillance footage had long been erased. Witnesses struggled to recall exact dates. Physical evidence had deteriorated or vanished. Locations had changed occupants. Every month that passed after Harmony disappeared reduced the chances of finding definitive proof. By the time authorities understood the scale of the case, they were investigating events buried beneath nearly 2 years of uncertainty. As details became public, the story quickly captured national attention. News organizations across the United States covered the case, focusing on one disturbing fact. A 5-year-old child had seemingly vanished without anyone realizing it for an extraordinarily long period. The mystery itself attracted attention, but what truly shocked the public was the apparent failure of multiple systems meant to protect vulnerable children. Public discussion soon expanded beyond the Montgomery family. Questions emerged about child welfare agencies, court decisions, communication breakdowns, and institutional oversight. How many warning signs had existed before Harmony disappeared? Why had earlier concerns failed to trigger stronger intervention? The case evolved into a broader conversation about the limitations of child protection systems and the consequences when those systems fail. Meanwhile, social media filled the gaps left by uncertainty. Theories ranged from abduction and trafficking to elaborate conspiracies. As often happens in high-profile cases, speculation spread faster than verified information. While some discussions generated useful awareness, many distracted from the known facts. Investigators repeatedly emphasized the importance of evidence over rumor as the search for answers continued. Amid growing media attention, Harmony's image became symbolic of a larger problem. She represented not only one missing child, but also the many children whose suffering remains hidden behind closed doors. Her case forced communities to confront an uncomfortable reality. Some children can remain invisible even while living among people who see them every day. Inside the investigation, attention increasingly centered on Adam Montgomery. Detectives repeatedly returned to him because much of the available evidence pointed in the same direction. Prosecutors later argued that Adam had a documented history of violence, emotional volatility, and poor impulse control. While personality alone does not determine guilt, behavioral patterns often help investigators understand how certain outcomes become possible. Authorities proposed that Harmony's disappearance was not the result of a sophisticated criminal plan. Instead, prosecutors suggested that it stemmed from an episode of violence followed by an effort to conceal what had happened. This theory aligned with witness statements, prior allegations of abuse, and evidence gathered during the investigation. It also reflected a pattern commonly observed in family violence cases. Investigators also focused on Kayla Montgomery. Their interest was not centered on whether she caused Harmony's disappearance, but on what she may have known afterward. In cases involving close family members, fear, loyalty, dependence, and self-preservation can create powerful psychological pressures. Those forces sometimes lead individuals to remain silent, even when they possess critical information. As detectives examined the family's history, they uncovered a broader pattern of instability. Adam's past included criminal offenses, substance abuse issues, and repeated encounters with law enforcement. Financial hardship and housing insecurity appeared throughout the family's history. None of these factors explained Harmony's disappearance on their own, but together, they revealed an environment where crisis had become routine. Perhaps most disturbing were reports showing that concerns about Harmony's welfare existed long before she vanished. Allegations involving injuries and possible abuse had been communicated through official channels, yet no intervention succeeded in providing lasting protection. Child welfare experts often note that major tragedies rarely result from a single failure. More often, they emerge when multiple warning signs are overlooked across different systems. By 2022, authorities publicly acknowledged what many had already feared. Despite the absence of a body, investigators announced that they believed Harmony Montgomery was deceased. The case shifted from a search for a missing child to a homicide investigation focused on determining exactly what had happened and who was responsible. A major breakthrough came through statements provided by Kayla Montgomery. Her testimony helped investigators reconstruct key events surrounding Harmony's disappearance and the months that followed. Combined with other evidence, her account strengthened the prosecution's case and offered a rare glimpse into what authorities believed had taken place behind closed doors. The trials that followed resulted in convictions tied to Harmony's death and the concealment of evidence. Yet one painful fact remains unchanged. Harmony has never been found. For many, one question remains: personal crime, systemic failure, or both? As we reach the final chapter of Harmony Montgomery's story, one painful reality remains. Evidence points in a direction, testimony provides a narrative, and courts have reached important conclusions. Yet Harmony's body has never been found. That absence continues to leave unanswered questions and prevents the case from ever feeling completely resolved. The leading theory is the one most consistent with evidence presented in court. Prosecutors argued that Harmony died during a severe episode of abuse in December 2019. Rather than seeking help afterward, those involved allegedly focused on concealing what had happened and avoiding responsibility for the consequences. From a behavioral standpoint, this theory follows a familiar pattern seen in some family violence cases. A moment of uncontrolled anger is followed by panic, denial, and self-preservation. The focus shifts away from the victim and toward avoiding accountability, creating a chain of decisions that deepens the tragedy. A second perspective examines the broader system surrounding Harmony's life. This theory argues that the tragedy did not begin in December 2019. It began years earlier through repeated warning signs, family instability, prior reports of concern, and missed opportunities for meaningful intervention. Viewed through this lens, Harmony was not only failed by individuals closest to her, she was also failed by institutions that lacked the coordination, urgency, or information needed to protect a vulnerable child before circumstances reached a point of no return. The uncomfortable reality is that these two theories are not mutually exclusive. One can accept that an individual bears primary responsibility, while also recognizing the broader systems failed to prevent foreseeable danger. In fact, many child welfare tragedies emerge precisely from this overlap. A harmful individual creates the immediate threat, but institutional weaknesses create the conditions that allow that threat to continue unchecked. This leads us to a difficult question. Was Harmony Montgomery the victim of one person's violence? Or was she the victim of a chain of failures stretching across multiple people and organizations? The answer may be both. Human beings often search for a single cause because it provides clarity. Real life is rarely that simple. Tragedies involving vulnerable children are often the result of many small failures converging into one irreversible outcome. To better understand this convergence, we must examine the psychology underlying severe child abuse. Contrary to popular belief, such abuse rarely begins with extreme violence. More often, it develops gradually through patterns of control, intimidation, emotional neglect, and escalating aggression. Each incident lowers the psychological barrier for the next. Over time, harmful behavior becomes normalized within the household, particularly when there are no meaningful consequences. Researchers examining patterns of long-term family violence often identify a process called moral disengagement. This happens when a person gradually stops recognizing the victim as someone with feelings and needs, instead seeing them as a burden or target of blame. Over time, empathy fades, anger is justified, and abuse can continue through repeated emotional distortion. Equally revealing is the psychology of concealment. Many people assume that guilt naturally produces confession. Criminal psychology often demonstrates the opposite. Once individuals become invested in avoiding consequences, they may engage in denial, rationalization, and deception. The objective is not necessarily to convince others of innocence. Sometimes it is simply to postpone accountability. Each successful deception creates pressure for another, resulting in a cycle that grows increasingly difficult to break. In Harmony's case, the continued absence of her body remains one of the most significant unresolved elements. From an investigative standpoint, future efforts may continue focusing on reconstructing the family's movements between late 2019 and early 2020. Transportation routes, temporary residence, storage locations, and overlooked witness accounts may still hold valuable information. Cold cases have been solved years later through the discovery of seemingly insignificant details that acquired new meaning when examined in context. Beyond criminal psychology, a deeper philosophical question emerges. How should society understand justice when answers remain incomplete? Many Eastern traditions suggest that every action leaves lasting traces. Consequences may appear slowly, but they continue unfolding. Even when truth stays partly concealed, its influence shapes lives, relationships, communities, and memories beyond the original event. Through this perspective, Harmony's story becomes more than a legal case. It reflects how human choices create lasting consequences that extend beyond one moment. Families endure pain, communities preserve memories, and institutions confront difficult questions. Justice may take time, yet the effects of actions continue regardless of final certainty. A Western philosophical view often emphasizes responsibility, morality, and the darker possibilities within human nature. Harmony's story reveals what occurs when obligations are abandoned and vulnerable individuals depend on those who fail to protect them. It reminds society that danger does not always come from outsiders, but sometimes from places expected to provide safety. Perhaps the most disturbing lesson is how easily suffering can remain hidden. Society often imagines that severe abuse announces itself through unmistakable signs. Reality is far more complicated. Harm frequently develops in private spaces, concealed by routine, rationalized by those involved, and overlooked by people who lack the full picture. The absence of visibility should never be mistaken for the absence of danger. Today, Harmony Montgomery has not been publicly seen since late 2019. Her body has not been recovered. Many questions remain unanswered. Adding further complexity, legal developments continued after the original trial. In June 2026, the New Hampshire Supreme Court overturned Adam Montgomery's second-degree murder conviction on procedural grounds and ordered a new trial on that charge, while other convictions related to evidence concealment and abuse of a corpse remained intact. The legal story, therefore, is not entirely finished. Yet regardless of future courtroom outcomes, one fact remains unchanged. A 5-year-old girl disappeared, and the adults responsible for protecting her failed in ways that can never be fully repaired. Harmony's name endures because people refuse to allow her absence to become invisible again. Every discussion of her case serves as a reminder that no child should vanish unnoticed, unheard, or forgotten. Some crimes leave no screams, only questions, and some silences echo louder than any confession. Thank you for listening to Criminal Mindcast.